by welcoming you all to our May Huddle meeting of the Women in Action Huddle. And as we always do, I like to take a moment to just sit together and breathe together, just to acknowledge that we are here in circle in a loving embrace, and that we in advance send out this love to the meeting that we're having, and we affirm that it will go according to plan and be of benefit to all those who are here. So we thank you all for being here. So the Women in Action Huddle is an activist and support for activist group that was started 4 years ago. We have many initiatives in the Newburyport area, from these monthly meetings in which we bring in speakers from important subjects in the area of social justice, human rights, and the environment. So we absolutely welcome you here tonight. We have plots out on the rail trail that we are growing indigenous food for our community. We have a vegetable plot we just started out there whose harvest will go to one of our food kitchens in our area. We do food drives and fundraisers, and we help people all the time. We do a lot of good things, we do. So tonight, we're just thrilled to have Representative Tram Nguyen from the 18th Essex District here to talk to us about AAPI hate crimes and harassment, and really delighted to have Deputy Director of Hollaback, Jorge Arteaga. I think you're in Brooklyn, aren't you? Hollaback is a global organization, more than 15 years old, training people to help be good upstander and bystanders. The huddle is self-supporting, and we invite you to contribute what you can by going to paypal.me/PegCenter, and we appreciate it. We appreciate all your support. Before we get going, I also want to just thank the beautiful Huddle Hub. Just everybody wave if you're on the hub, because your volunteer work has really, you give of your time and talent all the time to create these meetings, to bring about drives, to help everybody get involved. And this month especially, I wanted to thank Mark Rosen, Russ Holden, and Steve Mills, along with Melissa Mills, for the heavy lifting that you all did out on the rail trail to get those garden beds going. So really, thank you so much. Beautiful. So we're even ahead of schedule. So I am going to introduce you, Representative Tram, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, so you can unmute yourself. Thank you so much. So I want to welcome our first guest speaker, who is Representative Tram Nguyen, who tonight is going to talk to us about hate crimes against Asian American and Pacific Islander people specifically, as well as telling us about her bill, which is now an official bill, H1819 in the House, that will clarify and significantly bolster punishment for hate crimes and harassment. I had the pleasure of meeting her actually on Monday night at a Zoom webinar that she did for team leaders. And I was so struck by your passion and your enthusiasm, Tram, for all that you do. I could tell that your energy was contagious, and I'm so grateful to all of what you're doing in the State House. So as the state rep for the 18th Essex District, you beat in the 2018 election a 4-term Republican lawmaker incumbent, which, I mean, like, that must have surprised the hell out of you, because that's a big deal to do. So you are, here's a list of several of Tram's first. She's first-generation Vietnamese American immigrant who was the first person in her family to graduate from college and to graduate from law school. She is the first Vietnamese American woman to elected office in Massachusetts, the first Vietnamese American elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, the first Asian American on the board of directors of the Massachusetts Caucus of Women Legislators, the first Asian American woman to serve as vice chair of a committee, currently vice chair of the very important Labor and Workforce Development Committee. The list goes on and on. So my question, Tram, is, isn't it hard to be first? Isn't it Like, has it been difficult to be the first in so many areas? Is it exhausting or exhilarating or both? And I want to know, are you seen in the legislature, and how did you upset a 4-term legislator?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Huddle, and not just for inviting me to be a part of this very important conversation, but really for all the activism that you've done these past several years. I think that that is the most encouraging thing. You know, we all had to suffer through the 2016 election and what resulted from that. But the beautiful silver lining is that folks like yourself and so many others, you all were really the power that empowered me and so many others to run for office and to win our offices. And so I want to really emphasize the fact that I never thought I was going to be in elected office. I think, you know, a lot of people like to ask, like, oh, did you plan for this? Like, how did you plan for it? I have to say, no, I never planned for this. As mentioned, I was an attorney. I was working in legal services representing vulnerable people, including new immigrants, survivors of domestic violence, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, etc. And in doing that work, I got involved in policy making and helping out on several different pieces of legislation to help vulnerable clients that I saw. And again, it's my commitment to working with these vulnerable communities, some from the fact that I came to the United States when I was 5 years old as political refugees with my family, right to Lawrence, right here in the Merrimack Valley, and got so much support and resources from the community. And I genuinely believe that all of this needs to be available for everyone, for future generations, so that we make the investment in people and that they could pay back the community in so many ways, and like 100,000 folds. And so with that commitment, I worked on bills to build on racial, social, and economic justice. And that includes, you know, paid family medical leave, Fight for 15, making sure we have bilingual education in our schools. And in doing that work, I reached out to my rep at the time, and he didn't bother to even get back to me in 2 years. And for me, that's very problematic, because you can't represent the people if you don't hear the people and you don't listen to the people and care about the issues that they care about, even if you disagree with them. And so I never even had that conversation with my legislator, because he could not care less about what I thought about. And so when I saw that he proposed an amendment to allow police officers to stop anyone who looks illegal, that really was the straw that broke the camel's back. First of all, like, he wants to legalize racial profiling. And as an attorney, as a person of color, as someone who's been representing people of color, I saw just how dangerous that was, to have someone in office who genuinely believes that some people belong more than others. And so that was what prompted me to run for office in the first place. And I have to say, you know, Christina Eckerd's here. We ran together. We ran with several other women trying to, you know, upset these men who've been in office for so long. And unfortunately, around this area, I was the only one who won. And that was that to me was, to your point, very surprising to all of us, because the power of incumbency is really something very hard to overcome. It takes so much energy, so much effort, so much money. And that's the problem. Not everyone has the money. Not everyone has the time to commit to campaigning full time like I was able to do. I had to take 7 months off out of my job because I worked for a nonprofit. We get money from the state. There's a conflict. I couldn't run for office while working there. So that's a huge sacrifice. So I'm very thankful. I had a partner who was able to pay our mortgage for us and, you know, pay for most things, but that's truly a privilege that not many people have. But that's a problem. Like, why do we have so many of these hurdles in the way for people to get into office, and for people who are frankly very passionate and very committed to do the work, and they cannot get in the door because of all these barriers that are in the way. And so, and the work that I do, right now, as you mentioned, I'm the first for so many things, and that's shocking in so many ways, because it's 2019. Why was I the first Vietnamese American woman ever elected? And it took to this year, my second term, to have a vice chair who's Asian American, a woman. And it's just crazy to me, right? And so because of all these barriers that I saw when I was running, I'm very committed to building a pipeline, to supporting other people of color, or, you know, other women, diverse voices, because I believe that policy is more well-rounded when you have different voices, different experiences at the table, to make sure that we're not leaving any voices out, and to amplify voices that are often not heard. And that's what we've been committed to doing. And, you know, Christine Acker is part of my team, my legislative director, Tobin, all of us are very much committed to doing that and prioritizing bills that would uplift communities. So many of my bills, if you look through the list, is, you know, addressing issues of racial justice, social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, you name it, because we think that that in order to build a more welcoming and inclusive community, you have to really uplift the people who need it most. And so that's what I've been doing. And you know, we surprise everyone when I won on a progressive platform in these 4 towns that I represent that are not very progressive at all. But I was able to show people that I care and that I'm here to do the job.
Yeah, beautiful. So I want to back up a minute to your word belonging, because, you know, as I was doing some research about you, I read an article in the LA Times that just came out in March. It was an op-ed piece by an Asian American, Kurt Bardella. And in it was a quote by Stacy Chen, a producer at ABC, who shared, "I've been asked, but where are you from? More times than I can count. Every time someone asked me where I'm from, I'd say LA first, and then they'd look at me and ask again, okay, but where are you from?
Where are you really from?"
I don't get personally offended, but it kind of just makes me feel perpetually foreign. So I wonder if you could open our eyes to maybe the difference between BIPOC, Asian Americans, and that whole thing of like, where are you from means you don't belong.
Absolutely. So a couple of things I like to address here. I think that, you know, it's very difficult to address differences between API discrimination and BIPOC racism. And there's really, I just want to reiterate that there's no measuring stick for racism. Like I have it worse than you. It's just very different in the sense that for Asian Americans, to your point, that question of where are you really from, it seems to only be directed at APIs. It's like we're the only ones who don't belong, no matter how many generations you've been here. I've even had people say to me, well, you speak English very well for an Asian person. I was like, oh, you mean better than you do? But you know, it's like one of those things where it happens all the time, and it's so commonplace that many of us we just kind of brush it off, and that's the problem. And you know, I'm really glad Jorge is here to talk about being a bystander and upstander. And for many of us, we need to be upstanders for ourselves, because I've had that happen to me so many times growing up and, you know, going to school, whether it's at the workplace or whatnot, and I just kind of ignore it. And now that we're thinking through of how dangerous words can be, and how this misperception and stereotype of the perpetual foreigner has really resulted in such an increase in violence against Asian Americans. And so we need to just think back of where this all came from. A lot of folks, I have to say that we, as a community and community leaders, we anticipated this. Right when the COVID happened, right during the start of the pandemic, when the president of the United States decides to call this the China flu, or the China virus, or the Kung flu, all these horrible names that essentially put a target on the backs of Asian Americans, and no one's really spoke up. And then he emboldened many other leaders to do the same thing. So many of us here in our state, I remember back in March of 2020, the Asian caucus, the Black and Latino caucus, along with other electeds of color, stood in front of the State House where we had a press conference to say, this needs to stop. This will lead to an increase in violence. We can guarantee that that will happen, and we will not tolerate that. You know, now going forward to March of 2021, it culminated in that mass murder in Atlanta, resulting in the deaths of 8 people, 6 of whom are Asian women. It's so unfortunate that it took that mass murder for the media to pay attention to what has been happening for 16 months, 12 months up to that point. But we saw this, we knew this was going to happen. And but I want to say that it didn't start with the pandemic, and it's not going to end with the pandemic. We have a long-standing history of racism against Asian Americans, with the Chinese massacre, with the Chinese Exclusion Act, with the Japanese internment camps, with Vincent Chin. If you don't know of the story of Vincent Chin in the 1980s, two white guys who lost their jobs because, you know, the car industry has changed and Japanese cars were on the rise. And Vincent Chin was a Chinese man who was celebrating his bachelor's party, and they beat him to death and walked away with a probation and a few $1,000s in fines. So for us, like, and nothing happened, nothing else happened after that. And I think that is that sense of invisibility, right? We've been relegated as diseases, as sex objects too. The hypersexualization of women really is so problematic. And actually, I was on watching a panel by the YMCA just yesterday with Senator Ducksworth and Representative Ted Lieu. And they were talking about this very issue of the hypersexualization, and, you know, the question of, oh, where are you really from? You know, that has happened to me several times. But I've also had people come up to me saying, like, me love you long time, or other things. And it's just like, that's the image that they have of Asian women. And this is why I hate Miss Saigon, the play, so much. I saw it the other day. I was just like, no, like, several years ago, and I was just cringing throughout the whole time, because that's the only image that they have of Asian American women, particularly, that, you know, they can be bought and sold, they're very submissive and all that. As I'm sure you can see, I am not very submissive, and not at all that stereotype, but they don't care. That's what they see. You know, that's the first thing they see. And that is the issue that we saw. That was what happened, and what resulted in the Atlanta murder, is that there are people out there who think of us as so weak that they can do anything to us and not have anything happen to them.
Yeah. Well, so this is a good segue into something really incredibly positive that you have brought to your tenure, which is this bill. So it's H1819 in the House, but it's also in the Senate now too. So it's no longer, it's in active state at this point. And from what I understand, it's a rewrite of many segments of bills that clarify and institute more strict crimes for harassment and hate crimes. Is that correct? But take us through the process. How long has this been going?
So we want to clarify to folks, I think there's some misinformation out there that we filed this bill in response to the Atlanta shooting, which is actually not the case, because this bill has been in the works for several months. And in fact, we filed it probably late January, early February at some point, because of the rise in hate crimes overall, because we saw the rise in anti-Asian hate and violence. And as I'm sure many of you have seen, the study that showed, you know, 150% increase, over 3,400 hate crimes or incidents that have happened throughout this past year since the start of the pandemic. But we've also seen increase in violence and hate against the Jewish community, the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, and all that. So we crafted this bill to essentially rework what's currently in the law. So we have hate crime laws in the books, but they're vague and partially overlapping. So we're looking to put them all in one place, and also to expand the group of protected classes. Right now, I didn't realize this, but we don't have gender as part of our protected class, which is very surprising to me. And also we want to add an immigration status to address the rise in xenophobia that we've been seeing. We want the hate crimes bill to not only be workable, but to also meet the moment when we're seeing such a huge increase in xenophobia and gender-based violence. And so in addition to that, the bill would also allow for the prosecution of hate crimes if the bias motivation is just one of the factors. Like, as you saw in the Atlanta shooting, there's still a question of whether it be prosecuted as a hate crime, because apparently, you know, the guy had a bad day, he had a sex addiction. But you know what? Crimes happen, and crimes, there may be multiple motivations for particular crimes. So the hate and bias doesn't have to be the sole factor, or even the predominant factor, or even the substantial factor. It just needs to be one of the factors for this to go forward. And I was actually really thrilled to hear Representative Ted Lieu at the federal side. He filed a similar bill. Because at the federal level, it's even more clear right now. The law is like, this needs to be the only factor, and that just means no crimes get prosecuted as a hate crime, because no one actually does anything with just one motivation. And actually, no one's going to say like, yes, I targeted those 6 or 8 people because they're women, or no defendant's ever going to do that. And so we want to make sure that we have something in place that would allow for prosecution, for better accountability, because when a person commits a hate crime, it's a crime not just against the individual, but it's against whole communities. Like, as we're seeing here, they're seeing the vulnerability of communities, and they think that they can do these heinous things and get away with it. And that's what this bill is looking to address, is that we want to signal to communities that they matter, that we see them, that we're not going to tolerate this here in the Commonwealth at all. And the other thing is this bill would also make sure that the penalties fits the underlying crime, especially for those who are repeat offenders, because we think that that is where we need to really address this issue of like, why are we letting people get away with this over and over and over? And so I'm thrilled that to file this bill with the Attorney General as well as Senator Hines. It is, we haven't had a hearing date yet, but we are moving forward. And I have to say that this is not a panacea. This is not like the end all be all to end all hate and violence. That's never going to, no bill is ever going to be that. And so in conjunction with this particular criminal law aspect of it, we're also supporting things to increase community-based support, supporting programs like upstander training, making sure we're doing better data collection, because the problem is we don't know how pervasive the problem is, because people are not reporting. People are afraid. People don't want to report because they don't think justice will be served. So it's like one of those vicious cycles of like,
I'm noticing
why do I report it? And so there are all these other things that we're looking to do, including better education at the K-12 level, because what we're seeing is that people are trained, people learn to hate, I think. I don't think anyone inherently is born as, to hate people. And so how do we educate our kids so that they could, not only do we promote racially and culturally inclusive education, but to celebrate different authors, different achievements, and make sure that we have a better understanding of our history, so it's not so whitewashed, right? And I'm seeing a comment in here about how do we get others to encourage them to report crime. So first of all, they don't always need to go through the police. There is a 1-800 number for the civil complaint side through the Attorney General's office, which not many people know about, which is a problem. So we need to let people know that. But we also need to provide support to community groups that have language access, that have a cultural competency type of training to help community members that may need that. And we also need to be more intentional about this and support organizations that are promoting such programs and working to provide funding for them. And so through the House Asian Caucus, we were able to secure funding for the Asian American Institute at UMass Boston to do a study on anti-Asian hate crimes and how COVID has impacted the Asian American communities. These are the things that we should be supporting so that we have a better understanding of the problem and why people are so hesitant to report crimes, so that we can give them the support that they need to then report these crimes and incidents.
So we do have some questions, but I would like to, the huddle is, it's called the Women in Action Huddle. And so could you give us 4 or 5 things that we could literally either as a group develop, or what can we be doing that will impact this?
Absolutely. So we appreciate your support and paying attention to this issue. As I said, this bill is currently moving and we don't have a hearing date yet, but if you are in support, please sign up for my newsletter. If you go to votetram.com, you can sign up for our newsletter and we'll notify people, or get in touch with me. I've put my email in there, and I can put my email in there again in the chat again. But if you want to submit testimony and support, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. people, you know, I was an activist and advocate prior to getting elected. And I remember working with folks, especially those who are new to advocacy, and just reminding them that, you know, it's your stories matter, your opinions matter. You don't need to provide all these facts or anything like that. We just want to hear what is important to you and why this bill matters to you. But also email your reps and senators and ask them to co-sponsor the bill. It's H1819. Right now, it has bipartisan support, and with several Republican reps already signed on. But I don't think either Rep. Mira or Kelkhorst is signed on, and neither is Senator Tar. So if any of those reps and senators or your reps and senators, please reach out to them and ask them to sign on. And as for acts of violence against the AAPI community or against vulnerable communities, reach out to AAPI people to let them know that you are in their corner. Reach out to your friends and ask if they're okay. I remember right after the incident, I was not doing okay. It really rattled me to my core as, you know, one of 3 sisters. And I was just thinking to myself, this could happen to me. This could happen to my sister anytime. And I've told this story before, and I don't know if you've heard it, but I was in front of the courthouse back in 2016, representing a client doing a restraining order for her. And she's a new Vietnamese immigrant. So I was speaking to her in Vietnamese, and this guy rode by on his bike and said, "Get the F out of my country. You don't belong here." And I had flashbacks of that. Like, that guy literally could jump off his bike and punch me in the face anytime, because that is exactly what hate crimes are. It's unprovoked, and you just never know how to protect yourself, because you just never know what immutable characteristic would just trigger this other person. And so just check in on folks and see how they're doing. And also, if you see something, say something. This is why I'm so glad.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about right after this.
Right. And so that is exactly what we should be doing, and how to do it safely as well. And last but not least, we are doing it. Actually, we have a challenge this month, the Asian Caucus. We have the Shop AAPI month, where if you shop or you go to a Chinese, Asian restaurant or any other establishment, tag us, let us know that you're there, show support for Asian-owned businesses, because for many of them, I mean, all businesses have been impacted by the pandemic, but many Asian-owned businesses had to shut down even before that, because people didn't want to go to them because they were going to catch the virus from these businesses and all that. And so, I mean, that was the
so maybe we might have time, Debbie, if you can unmute yourself, if there's a question or a comment. I think we have time for 1 or 2 at the most, probably just 1. But Christina, could you put the bill number back in the chat for us? And thank you. And any other synopsis of Representative Tram that you want to put in the chat for us. So Debbie, what have you got for us?
So Jean had a comment and it disappeared from my screen, but it's about the media. And that just the comment is that, you know, they're sort of they're responsible for some of what's going on, the way they spread news. And the question is sort of, how has that impacted you, and what is your perspective on that? And Jean, since I can't see it, I don't know if I missed anything on.
Thank you for the question. It was very irresponsible rhetoric. I have to say, you have to also, I should have added that you need to hold your elected officials accountable for their words in addition to their actions, because I mean, I don't think this happened here in our state, but for so many other states, it's not just the president. We have to remind folks that it's like other leaders using that, and to your point, the media using those exact phrases that were really problematic. But I have to say that I have been very encouraged by the news coverage since the Atlanta shooting. They have really touched upon the nuances and also the differences among different AAPI groups. We're not a monolith. And I think that the media is starting to catch up on that. But it really does take a lot more. And we need to get more people of color into these professions. My sister is actually a journalist, and she seems to know all the AAPI journalists out there. She's like, there are like 10 of us. And so that's a huge problem. And, you know, Shirley Long from the Boston Globe, I've been in constant communication with her, because she's like, do you have a story? Do you have anything else for us to cover? Because I'm the only one covering this. It shouldn't fall on her shoulders. It should be on everyone else's responsibility as well to report the story correctly. And so there is a lot of work for us to do together, but these are all the things that we need to continue to do. It's not going to change overnight.
Do you think it would be helpful, sorry, to finish Jean's question, do you think it'd be helpful for us as individuals to contact the press and insist that they cover?
Absolutely.
the
If you
issue?
see them report something in a negative way or incorrectly, yes, we all need to call them out. I mean, the papers around here too are quite conservative. And sometimes I've just called them up. Sometimes they'll quote me and I was like, that's not what I said at all. So we do need to continue to correct them and make them do the right thing.
Well, what a pleasure you are. Maybe you'll run for governor and then we can all vote for you. Have you got the time, the inclination?
Thank you. I think I'm hoping
my
to just
God.
survive the second term. I mean, I got elected and then the pandemic happened halfway through my first term. And so I think that for us right now, we're just hoping to do a good job in my current role.
I know that everybody here appreciates your coming and your speaking, and just thank you for everything that you're doing. And we're going to have you back because this is an ongoing process. Both you and Jorge are terrific educators and outstanding activists, but we need encouragement along the way. So I thank you, Tram, very much for your time tonight. And
thank you for having me, and I'll stay on to hear what Jorge has to say too.
Yes,
and please be in touch, Jorge. We definitely could be working together on a lot of these.
Well, I noticed, Jorge, and you can unmute now, that you were just nodding your head at a lot of what Trump said. So that was obvious that there's a lot in common there. But so I want to introduce you now, if I may, because I'm really delighted to have you here. It took me like 3 weeks of writing that word Hollaback to figure out what it was. Hollaback, and it makes so much sense to me. But it's been a pleasure to work with you, and you've been so accessible to us, and we hope that we can create a training for our community. We'll hopefully have a chance to talk about that at the end of your segment. But so tell us, Hollaback started 15 years ago with street sexual harassment. And then as I've been reading, the ground of being that you are covering now is expanded to all the necessary places that we really need you. So, well, two things. When did you come to Hollaback? And can you tell us about some of the programs that you are now, after 15 years in the field, accomplishing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having Hollaback, inviting me. This is Massachusetts is a very special place in my heart. I actually lived there for a couple of years as a kid. I have my family over there, my nieces, my nephew, my sister. They lived in Amesbury and are now relocated in the Salem Marblehead area. So honored to share space with y'all. I'm grateful. Yeah, so Hollaback, we started as a street harassment blog in 2005, really in a time where folks weren't talking about street harassment or even thought it was a thing to talk about. We wanted to provide a space where people could come and just share the experience and say, like, this thing happened to me, and have other folks say, I've got your back, I believe you, right? And just kind of leave it there, because there's always been this idea of having to prove that this horrible thing happened to me. I personally came to Hollaback 2 years ago now. Prior to coming to Hollaback, I did some racial justice work with Color of Change, some arts education initiatives down in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then worked at the LGBT Community Center, providing meeting space and conferencing space for LGBTQ plus affinity groups. So, how did we get to where we are today? So originally, we didn't offer bystander intervention training at all. We were just at a blog post, and that was actually inspired. The co-founders, 7 young folks hanging out in New York City, talking about their experience, and quickly realizing that the young women and the young men in the group have very different, realities or experiences of living in a big city. Relatedly, at the same time, one of our advisory board members, Nguyen, was also a young professional at the time, on her way home from work, and a middle-aged, white man gets up in front of her on the subway, exposes himself, starts to masturbate in front of her. And just kind of enraged, she pulls out her phone and takes a photo of this.
Wow.
She gets off the train and goes to the nearest police precinct, and is kind of told, well, what do you expect us to do at this point? He's probably long gone by now. There's plenty of other middle-aged white men in the city. We can't do anything about it. So that night she went home and posted it up on Flickr. Flickr is like a media, old school media photo share site. And the next day it ended up on the front page of the Daily News. And a couple of days later they caught the man. So kind of inspired by this, Hollaback wanted to collect stories. So we were collecting mapping stories, and fast forward to about 2011, 2012, we start to realize, like, man, this is kind of depressing, right? Like, there's just all these stories of harassment. There's no silver lining. There's nothing, right? There's no help. No one's coming. What can we do about this? And so we commissioned the study of the stories we had collected with Cornell University. And after the analysis, one of the through lines that were consistent, that the only good thing that ever happened when folks experience harassment was when someone intervened on their behalf to support them in some way. So when we saw that, we reached out to Green Dot, originally they're now called altruistic, but they had the 3Ds of bystander intervention, and we're focused on campus sexual assault, right? So we took the framework, the methodology, and kind of readapted it to talk about street harassment, and then added document a form of intervention and homage to our beginnings, how we started, and then we added delay, which came out of that Cornell study, which showed that, like, folks were traumatized even further. They were actually traumatized more when people saw them being harassed and didn't say or do anything or even check in with them afterward.
Yeah.
So delay is checking in with the person afterward. And I'll talk a little bit more about the 5Ds.
Yeah, we'll do the 5Ds a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know what? This might be a good time to segue to, we have a short video of about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That many of us don't know the extent, and this is actually from it's from Fox News. Can you even believe it, Jorge, that this is, but here we go. So you're queued up, and we'll watch this video together.
Yeah, absolutely. So can folks see my screen?
Yes.
All right.
We've seen rich discussions about how to identify hate in our communities, but would you know what to do if you witnessed it firsthand? A Houston nonprofit offers training to show bystanders of all comfort levels how to help.
We are here to center ourselves, focus ourselves on taking care of the person who's experiencing the harm.
Bystander Training 101 is a monthly interactive webinar offered by the Houston Coalition Against Hate and designed based on more than a decade of research from the nonprofit Hollaback.
We've collected and mapped over 15,000 stories of harassment from all over the globe. And as we read those stories, we started to notice that the only good thing that ever happened to people who were experiencing harassment was when somebody stood up for them.
The training dispels the fear that you would have to get directly involved to effectively help someone who's being targeted.
You don't have to put an S on your chest, strap a cape on, and do some huge heroic gesture. We can always have our intentions in the right place, but we want to make sure we own the impact, not only that it's going to have on the people, but also that it could potentially have on us. We tell you in the beginning, assess your safety.
So the training offers 5 different avenues for supporting a victim of harassment or hate. 4 of them are indirect ways to help, like documenting what's going on, a bystander action that proved its power this past year in the case of George Floyd.
One of the most powerful tools when used properly.
By proper use, they teach to film without pulling attention to yourself and then putting that footage in the hands of the victim or their family. There's even a powerful way to help that comes after the harassment has occurred.
Delay. After the incident of harassment is over, you want to check in with the person who is experiencing the harm.
Research between Hollaback and Cornell University found that even a silent, knowing glance toward the victim can reduce the traumatic impact of what just happened, meaning even if you don't share a language, you can make a meaningful impact. They point out that standing up against even small acts of hate or bias helps fight against a culture that might escalate to more violent actions.
So let's put it into action, right?
The interactive training includes practice with polls allowing you to anonymously share which of the 5Ds you would choose in various situations. You gain confidence learning that there's many right answers and all provide unique value. Private messaging lets you submit questions to instructors that you might be otherwise embarrassed to ask in front of others. The virtual course was designed at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in direct response to a rise in anti-Asian sentiment in America. But it doesn't just focus on xenophobia.
We try to cover across the board, like all identity-based harassment in our training.
The Houston-based class now regularly attracts attendees from across the country.
This is what the virtual space allows us. It allows us to really expand our reach beyond just the city.
A bystander intervention webinar is offered.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's a really good segue into the 5Ds. Can you talk about them to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just populated a link for folks who want to check out our trainings. They are available to the public and absolutely free. So please, and we have them on a variety of topics, not just, in support of the API community, but also to stop police-sponsored violence, anti-Black racist harassment, to support the learning differences community, and also gender-based violence. So if y'all want to check those out. Yeah, so the 5Ds of bystander intervention, bystander intervention is by no means a new idea, right? I get folks say all the time, like, oh, this is so cool. Like, this is not new, right? Like, Hollaback just put a framework around some of the things that some folks already do to take care of themselves, each other. Particularly, I know in communities of color, myself, I've seen, how we use some of these tools to take care of each other already. So we just wanted to create something that was quick, easy to refer to in those moments when you see harm happening, but you like freeze up and don't know what to do. We wanted to provide you a framework. So I'm going to say them quick, but I'm happy to elaborate more and even give examples if folks want. So we have distract. Distraction is creating a distraction to de-escalate the situation. And I'll actually tell you a little bit more. A way you can do that is maybe walking up if you see some situation happening and going to the person who's experiencing the harm and saying something like, hey, I'm lost. Can you help me with directions? Or some folks get a little more creative and like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in such a long time. How's your family? And the whole idea is to kind of take the attention off of the situation and give the person a way out. You want to give them a way out of the conversation, out of the interaction. The second one is delegate. Delegate is finding someone else to help you. When you think about delegate, I think the first thing you want to think of is your fellow bystanders, the folks around you who probably also want to do something, but don't know about the 5Ds, don't know what to do, and just need like that little nudge into action. So ways you could do that is like, hey, do you see what's happening? Can you go and get help? Or can you help? Can you say something while I go and get help? Because I don't feel comfortable saying something. Or again, finding an authority in that space. So if you're in a supermarket, maybe it's a manager. If you're at, a restaurant or bar, maybe it's like, your server, but finding someone who's an authority in the space. We often hear folks say, well, what about 911? What about the police? Now, we don't recommend that you call the police as the first option unless you are in complete fear for that person's life. There's like if you see extreme harm or violence, then use your own discretion. But we tell folks, if you can, check in with the person first who's experiencing the harm, because sometimes calling the police can actually put them at an increased risk, right? We don't know what their background with law enforcement is, what their immigration status is. We don't know what their history with law enforcement is. So you want to be thoughtful there whenever you can. The next one is document. So creating documentation of the situation. And then the most important part is giving it to the person who experienced the harm and allowing them to choose how that story gets reported or shared, right? Oftentimes folks think that, let me just post it up on social media. It's not cool. We've actually seen instances where folks who experienced harassment and sexual assault didn't find out about it until it was already on, in social media and the public media. So you can imagine how much more horrible that experience was for those people. Another important thing about document is make sure that someone else is doing something first. How horrible could it be, to kind of have this voyeurism thing happen, right? Where folks are filming you, but not doing anything to support you. We've seen that happen here in New York City on one of the subways. I would say a couple of months ago, a woman was being sexually assaulted in pure daylight. It was like 11 o'clock in the morning. And a whole group of bystanders rallied to film, but no one actually stopped it from happening.
Wow.
So want to make sure that other folks are doing something. And then we have delay. As you saw, delay is checking in with the person after the situation has passed. There is tremendous, tremendous value in that. We often get folks who say, well, that's not really intervening because it's after the fact. And as I mentioned in the research, we saw that people are often more traumatized by the fact that no one checked in with them, right? And checking in can look like, hey, do you need me to walk with you somewhere? Is there someone I can call for you? Would you like to have some water? Do you want me to accompany you? Just making sure that person knows that they have someone there to support them. And then last is direct. I'm actually a direct intervener. It is not because I'm 6 foot tall and 350 pounds, but that helps. Direct is essentially, speaking up about the disrespectful behavior when you see it, kind of being firm, concise, saying what you see, but then not getting into a back and forth, right? Turning your attention to take care of the person. So an example of that might be, hey, that seems that was inappropriate, or that was racist, or that wasn't right. You look like you're making that person looks uncomfortable, or you're making that person upset. You should get away from them and give them a clear action, right? Maybe get away from them is too vague. Maybe it's you're on the bus. When we get to the next stop, I would like for you to get off the bus. Right? Like give them a clear action, but then don't entertain it back and forth. I would say the most important thing about using direct is we want you to assess your safety. When people think of intervention, they seem to think the only way to intervene is to be direct. And actually, we want you to notice your scenario. Okay, notice who's around you. Are you going to be supported if you decide to say something? Like, are folks around you? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? What's going on? Is the other person at a point of escalation where maybe direct is not the safest bet for you? And then choose one of the Ds that feel the most appropriate for that situation.
I watched a couple of videos in preparation for getting to know you and what your organization does, and there aren't very many current, ways of learning about this. Mm-hmm. But I did watch one that was several years old, and it was a scenario they put, there was a woman on the ground, and she was in really messed up clothing, and how long it took for people to actually stop to see if she was all right. Mm-hmm. It was almost 30 minutes. And then they showed another one in which one person asked if she needed help, and they called it the power of one. And suddenly when one person helped, everybody else felt like they could too. Mm-hmm. So if we could, every single person at this meeting, be the power of one in a situation that we came across, mm-hmm. it would gather all the other resources around us, don't you think? It just...
Absolutely. I also think, look, like bystander intervention, something that Representative Tram was saying, like, you don't need to wait until things get really horrible to feel like that's the only time to intervene, right? If we're going to start to shift the tide, change the culture of harassment where, oh, it's okay, or that's the price you pay for being a woman, queer, or person of color, we have to start to look at it like Hollaback has our spectrum of disrespect, which you saw a bit of, right? And we talk about how when you are able to intervene in those more microaggressive forms of disrespect or harassment or hate, like the perpetual foreigner, right? Like, where are you really from, right? Comments like that, when you can intervene in those, you start to chip away at that culture that makes harassment okay, right? Because ultimately, those microaggressive behaviors are the platform for which then these worst forms of hate and harassment happen, right? Then you start to see when we don't check people or say something, when they make comments like, no, what country are you really from? Or all those Chinese people, right? Knowing that Asian American, Pacific Islanders come from a variety of countries, right? But when you don't say those things, then all of a sudden it becomes okay for people to start using the terms China virus, or the Wuhan flu, or choosing not to patriate Asian American owned businesses, which then leads to the more atrocious behaviors that we've seen in the media.
Yeah. And I think that for communities like Newport that are obviously very white and very affluent, we don't encounter a lot of the really bad harassment, but I think that most of us feel incredibly unable, shy, apathetic about, even like you described, like when somebody is harassing somebody about where do you come from, you don't belong here, that would be an opportunity, and that is something that might happen here. But we have to get over our fear and apathy in order to intervene on even the little things, which actually leads me to, like, do you think it would be valuable for us to try to put together a citywide harassment training with Hollaback? That's what, where we could ask our city government, our teachers, our nurses and doctors, artists, all people to take it, so that it could start a conversation together as a community.
Yes, absolutely. When we talk about, Hollaback is against criminalization, right, of things like harassment, only because ultimately they disproportionately affect people of color, communities of color. But when we talk about community solutions, right, bystander intervention training is right up there. So here in New York City, we've partnered with the Commission on Gender Equity and the Mayor's Office to End Domestic Violence and Gender-Based Violence to train, 40,000 New Yorkers on bystander intervention.
Wow.
We recently made a call on the MTA due to the spike in crime, right? There's been like a 67% reduction in ridership on the New York City MTA system. And there's been a 56% increase in crime. So you could just imagine, right? That's kind of wild. And we're like, we need to train folks so that they feel prepared to, or ready to swing into action when they see something. I would say, this idea of just getting the conversation going, right? Getting people to think outside of, there is something you can do. And you talked about fear, like shoving it down. I actually don't want people to shove their fear down or get over it, right? We want you to really come face to face, address what is that fear? What is that bringing up for me? Because once you're able to address that, then you can find a way that works for you, right? Intervening is not by any means easy, and everyone's going to show up differently. But there's definitely that power of one. There's at least one thing that you can feel sure doing.
So we need to raise, from what I understand, we need to raise $2,000 to have a specific, would it be specific to our community, or you and I will work on this?
Yeah, so actually, you have a few options. We could work on designing something specifically for your community. So we would work on, building in things that have happened either locally or incidents that you might see folks in your community experiencing more, so that they can practice those together. But we also have our Stand Up Against Street Harassment training, which is funded by L'Oreal Paris to train 1 million people globally. And we could offer that to the community for free. And that covers 2 methodologies. That covers our bystander intervention, so how to support others, but it also covers our how to respond when you're the person who experienced.
So I think we have a lot of comments and questions, but just one last question for you, which you've just been wonderful. So what do the numbers look like? Like, are we seeking this bystander training more? Have the numbers spiked in your training?
Oh, absolutely. So, last year, again, as Representative Tram was saying, right, like the hate against the API community is not a COVID thing. It's been around since before COVID, right? I'm a historian, so I always make the joke, right? Like, or not even the joke, but the fact that Frederick Douglass in like 1868 or 69 gave a lecture in Boston where he talks about how we need to take care of and accept our Asian American brothers and sisters, right? How they are part of the country. So we came together early March. We saw, the increase. I think there was the first story we saw happen in Chinatown here in New York City. And Emily, our executive director and co-founder, wrote to me and said, we need to do something about this because it's just going to get worse. So at our first public training, we had like 3 demo trainings. So one thing I like to share with people, we did not go at this alone and like say, oh, we know what the API community needs. No, we actually have a partner, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, based out of DC. And we worked with, I believe, 18 community groups, AAPI community groups to help bring this training to fruition. Our first one, we broke Zoom. We had like 1,000 people show up in the meeting format. We forgot to like put mute. So you could imagine how wild that was. People were joining. It was just wild. But then we learned, right? And then at the end of last year, we had trained about 16,000 people. And we thought like, oh my God, this is so great. We trained 16,000 people. But then fast forward after Biden signed the executive order condemning hate towards the API community. And then I think a couple of weeks later, were the Atlanta shootings, we saw a tremendous outpouring of support and just folks wanting to do something.
Yeah.
So in that time, I would say in the last 6 weeks, we've actually registered 130,000 people on that training.
Wow.
We've trained about 70,000 of those people. And we've gotten funding to continue the training, not only for this year, but next year, and also to provide it in 6 major Asian languages, as well as adapt it to a youth curriculum. So people are showing up, we're training 5,000 people at a time now. And we have hope, what we've seen is hope. Folks are hopeful.
Yes. So Debbie, I think you have some questions and we have to keep it brief. The last thing that we'll do after Jorge's questions will be that Maria has another drive for the huddle. So she's going to tell us all about that.
There's a couple similar questions related to youth. Sharon asked if there's training for youth. She's got kids that are 14 and 12. And then Harriet was asking if it's appropriate for schools to have training like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the training as is right now can, based on feedback we've received from educators, administrators, and we've trained as young as 14 years old on the methodology as is. We've pushed it with 12-year-olds, but what we found was we had to break up the training into 2 kind of broader chunks so that it's digestible. So right now I'd say 12 is probably the youngest we can go, but we are in the process of actually adapting it for audiences as young as 3. We're working with some folks from Sesame Street to make that happen. So.
You have more questions, Debbie, for Jorge?
There's a story that I don't know if Ann Hauser wants to speak up, but she put a personal story in the chat.
Yeah, it would be kind of a long story to tell, but I think, well, it happened years ago, and I have a son who was born in Guatemala City, and at the Yankee homecoming parade, we were harassed. Like I say, it was a long story, really badly by some people nearby, and nobody even acknowledged that it was happening. And so when you say that it means a lot just to have somebody
Yeah,
tell you that they're sorry that that happened to you, or even say hello,
Yeah.
but just to watch, just to know that people are watching and staring and not reaching out
wow.
was it was the hardest part of the whole situation.
Yeah,
You feel totally alone.
Mhm.
So thank you for saying that.
that's wonderful.
Is so
Yeah.
important, because it is.
So if we have anything more of import, we'll get it out to you, but I'd like, if that's okay, just to thank Jorge very, very much, and we look forward to working with you in the very near future. We're going to get this together, because I think it's a really good community-wide opportunity to start a conversation, and it's a pleasure. So thank you so much. I'm just going to hand it over quickly to Maria Chanin, who's our drive maestro with the latest one that the Huddle is going to get involved with.
Well, thank you, Paula. Well, first of all, I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation, and I just can't even tell both of you how awesome you both are. I just found this to be amazing. So
Me too.
thank you. And the thing I want to say is, like Ann said, if it were your child or your parent or your neighbor or your friend, and you saw something and you didn't do anything, you're traumatizing that family or that person again.
Yeah.
So please, I urge you to look at ihollaback.org. I've taken 3 of the trainings. I found them to be, it's an hour of your time, and it'll plant a seed of what you could do. And it can be as simple as create a distraction. You're in a grocery store. The best thing to do is drop a glass item. The
Yeah.
entire store staff will come
Yeah.
running. You don't even have to do anything. Anyway, I just hope you will seriously consider it and tell your friends. I was on a call that had 3,000 people from all over the world in the United States.
It took me 2 weeks to get into a training. They're filling up so fast, but Mark and I are the 17th of May is ours. Yep.
Awesome.
Mine's
Okay.
tomorrow on Asian harassment.
Good, you.
Yay.
All right. So Maria, what you got for
Okay.
us?
All right, I'll get to that. Okay, you know Debbie and I as the collections and drives chairs. For the month of June, the Huddle is getting very, very personal. You may not know this, but personal care items are not covered by food stamps or EBT. So we're talking, toothpaste, toothbrushes, deodorant, all these items, diapers, laundry detergent. Think about how much you spend for your family budget for those items. If you couldn't, use your food stamps, you would spend a lot of money. So what we're going to focus on is, and I hope you can see this, toilet paper. Now, I know it sounds very personal, and it is, and I'm purposely holding up one roll because food pantries, if they have it, will typically give a family 1 roll a week. 1. Okay. So we're going to focus on toilet paper for Community Service of Newburyport, which is an organization that you'll learn more about at our next Huddle. Okay.
Yep.
And the other thing that I would like us to focus on is actually asking folks to contribute some money to a personal care fund that we will put together to donate to First Parish Church of Newbury, because 70% of their guests are elderly. And the elderly have, talk about lack of dignity and embarrassing. They have problems, can have problems with incontinence. Those items are so expensive and can isolate them and keep them from getting together with family and friends.
Yeah.
So if we put together a little fund, they can use those monies, the pantry, to buy what they need for their guests. Okay. So hopefully you will be looking at your secret stash if you have one and donating maybe a package. Okay. But
All
anyway,
right.
you guys have been super generous, and I hope you'll be captains in your neighborhoods and collect toilet paper and maybe donate some money. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody. Jorge, thank you for taking the time, and I'll be in touch soon. And thank you for the work you're doing. Really, it's helping us all. So it was a wonderful meeting. I appreciate everybody's presence. And you'll hear from us soon.